Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Mike Squires, and this is the Couchress Podcast, episode number 267 or 268. I don't know. How am I supposed to know? I'm just the person that does everything. My guest this episode is Mr. Dave Dederer. Now, you may know Dave Dederer from the Presidents of the United States of America. What a dude. He has a real interesting story. And it was a genuine pleasure to have him on the podcast. Now, I guitar teched for the last handful of Dave Dederer dates when he played guitar with the Presidents before that seat was handed over to Andrew McKagan, who's also a stellar human and player. And he actually told a story that was one of his most embarrassing stories. I don't recall the story, but I love it. I have a hard time believing that I would have been intimidated in the moment. But maybe that's why I blocked it out. I don't know. Stick around and hear the story. It's pretty great. It's also shocking what he did. I can't believe he would do that shit. Naughty. Shame on you, David. Dave has also had a bunch of interesting, behind the scenes music industry jobs, and we go into a bit of that as well. He's currently playing in 4 different bands around Seattle, including one with some of my bandmates and collaborators, and go out and check out Bowie Rex and the Boogie Army. It's super duper 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 awesome. They're playing down by my house at the Flight Path in July. I believe it's July. I'll be there because it's a good time, and you know what I love? I love a good time. I had a wonderful time talking to Dave. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. We're going to get into it now. But not before. I encourage you to support Couchress Podcast on Patreon. Patreon.com/Couchriffs. I post episodes up there a week early. Time management is tough for me right now. I'm working on stuff that extra content that I can put up there. I'm working on more in-studio cover songs. Those go up early. The downloads of those songs, the only place you can get those is on Patreon. And again, I'm working on more of those things. They cost a lot of money, so those things are dependent on Couchriff's Patreon support. So if you are already supporting Couchriffs, thank you so much. It is everything. It's everything. If you have been considering it for a while, perhaps today is the day. You click over there and you go, yeah, I'll toss you $5 a month. Why not? What's $5? What's buying a cup of coffee for someone who makes a bunch of content that I enjoy? If you want to buy 2 cups of coffee, great. You know what that is? Twice as much, 200%. And it's $10, cheaper than, Netflix. I don't have as much shit up there as Netflix, but you get the point. I don't have the same resources. So anyway, thank you so much. I appreciate you. I appreciate you just watching and listening. So lastly, the old standard. As you travel through your day and your week and your year and the rest of your life, don't forget to behave with the golden rule in mind. Treat people the way you want to be treated. If people walked around treating each other with respect exclusively, the world would be a much more beautiful place, and we'd be able to communicate a lot better. If we could just all muster to not be assholes. It's not that much to ask. Be cool.
Yeah.
So,
I'll never forget
pretty fun.
when our first record was blowing up, we got an invite from AC/DC.
Really?
To open a whole American tour. And I'm like, we could agree, even though we don't want to, but at least 2 of us would be dead halfway through the first song of the first night. Like somebody would actually come up on stage and kill us.
No, but I think that it's within the realm of possibilities to get booed off.
Oh, yeah. Kitty at my foot and I want to...
All night.
Angus.
Yeah, no, that would be a
Angus.
tough gig. Like, as much as I love AC/DC, and I've got an Angus Young tattoo,
Yeah.
I don't want to open for them.
I've said repeatedly in the last 10 years, I will go on tour again if I can play guitar in either AC/DC or Oasis. Those are the only two bands I'm interested in being in. I play Malcolm Young's guitar parts, and Oasis, I don't even need to be plugged in. I just want to be behind Liam, who I think is the only rock star left in the world, and is fucking
He's
genius,
definitely a
hilarious
rock star.
dude. And his solo records are killer.
I like that High Flying Birds record.
Yeah.
I had a nightmare once. And this was when I was like, I really want to get back to playing music. I just want to get a gig. I want to get a gig. I had a nightmare that I got in Oasis. And
a dream
full
for me.
disclosure, I'm not an Oasis fan. Like, to me, it's fine, and I don't care. I know it. I don't think it sucks by any means. I think it's good. It's not for me. Like, when I hear it, I don't change the channel. I just don't care about it.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something about the gig, like I resented it. I resented that was the gig I got, and I didn't take it seriously. And I showed up for the first gig, and I didn't know the songs. And it was like one of those stress.
I've had
things.
most of my playing music live dreams. I don't. It's not a like, well, I'm playing with Ted Nugent and we're crushing Cat Scratch Fever. It's like, I'm playing with Ted Nugent and I can't remember how to put the guitar around my neck.
He's aiming his bow at me.
Yeah, exactly. No, they're all nightmares for me. I've never had one where it's like, we were shredding and there were 100,000 people there. It was amazing. It's always like, fuck, I don't know the song. Yeah, I forgot my homework,
I have a friend who
school.
auditioned for Oasis.
Really? Guitar or bass or?
Guitar. And I'm hoping to get him on the podcast. He'll be in town in September. I don't want to say who it is because I want to get him to tell the story. Oh. But I heard this story from someone else in the band. And they were like, yeah, so fill in the blank auditioned for Oasis, and he tried to rewrite the bridge of one of their songs.
I'm sure Noel loved that.
Because I did a rehearsal with this guy.
Mm-hmm.
I had 2 rehearsals with him. And at one point he came over and like turned a knob on one of my effects pedals. And I didn't know him all that well. And I'm a lot bigger than him, but I kind of gave him a look like,
what the fuck is Stan?
Yeah. Well, yeah. What do you think you're doing?
Yeah.
And I relayed that story, and one of the other bandmates was like, "Oh, dude, that's nothing. Check this out."
Well, Oasis, I wasn't a fan. I mean, I wasn't not a fan. You couldn't avoid them. And when What's the Story? Morning Glory was out. And actually, Noel came. I met him. He came because we had, before Kula Shaker's first record came out, they supported us a whole bunch because they were on Sony. And Oasis loved Kula Shaker and helped them blow up, which they did for a year in the UK. So Noel came to a show we were headlining the Brixton Academy, and he was super chill. He was with his then girlfriend, later first wife. There were no beers. I went up to our green room and brought them some beers down, and he tried to make conversation with me, but I was too kind of tongued out. Are you the one what plays the SG? And I'm like, no, I play Stratocaster, whatever. Okay, don't talk to me. I'm freaking out. Right. But then,
are you the one that plays? Are you the one?
Well, then, like 7 or 8 years ago, a friend of mine, Scott Trethaway, who has one weird meet a famous person experience after another. He's a guy from Seattle who's in the mint business, family business, and he's just a cool, chill dude. He was drinking at a hotel bar in Chicago like 7 or 8 years ago, just hanging out, and some English guy comes in and starts drinking next to him. It turns out they're like, "Oh, what are you doing in town?" "Oh, I'm playing a rock show tonight." And Scott's like, "Where?" "At the Normal Dome." And Scott's like, "Yeah, right, sure you are." It turns out it's Liam. They get wasted. Like they drink from like 3 in the afternoon till 3 in the morning. Scott calls me at 11. "Are you the what with the 2 strings and what sings about peaches?" So then, like 5 years ago, I'm in Paris for Amazon Music, and they're like, "Oh, you got to go. Warner Brothers is having a thing," and it was Liam's second solo record, I think. And somebody tips me like, "Okay, the secret act tonight for the party is Liam. I'm going to tell you because I know you're an Oasis fan." And they played in like a little black box room like this size. I go in, It's full backline for like 4 songs. Teleprompters, the whole fucking thing for like 50 people. And I'm texting my friend Scott because he'd stayed friends with Liam's bodyguard guy. I'm like, you gotta connect me. I gotta like say hi. And he couldn't pull it off. So I was waiting by the door to be the first person in. I walk in, the riser's like 4 inches, right? It's no stage. I walk in, the band comes out, they're full, their hair's all done. They're all like, they got that rock and roll sign on the front of the Hammond B3. They got like fucking, the whole rig there. And Liam walks out with his, in his anorak and he's got on these awesome like ankle height moccasins with a fringe. He walks out. He's standing closer to me than you are right now, like 3 feet away from me. And everybody in there's fucking French. Nobody speaks English. And I just looked at him and I'm like, nice fucking moccasins. He didn't even look at me. It was amazing.
He was just get fucked.
Yeah, he didn't even blow me off. I might as well have just, anyway, it was, and then he killed it. He did like 4 songs and just destroyed a room of 50 people.
Well,
so anyway, I would be in AC/DC, although Malcolm's son has the job tied down, and I think I'd be in Oasis. Who say they're getting back together? That's the word.
That would be
to
something.
make $1 jillion in 5 nights at Wembley, probably.
That would be something. Mm-hmm. People would care.
Yeah.
Everyone but me.
Yeah, you wouldn't care. Yeah. You'd be indifferent. You wouldn't.
I might check it out. I wouldn't buy a ticket.
I wouldn't either. I wouldn't fly to London to see. But I got, for some reason, 8 or 10 years ago, that What's the Story Morning Glory record. I listened to it, and I just got kind of obsessed with it. I tend to listen to like one record exclusively for 3 months.
Right.
And it became one of those records where it's just like, it's really a thing,
Sure.
I love bands where it's like, you hear 2 or 3 songs in a row and you are in there. It's, we can never see the world through other people's eyes, but I think music's one of the cool ways where a really great songwriter, singer, you feel like you're seeing the world through their lens. And that record does that. You're like, and I'm not a bloke from Manchester, but like I can see what the world looks like to these guys.
Also, whatever's happening in your life, you attach those songs to it, and you're hearing it through that filter, and you're interpreting it and making it fit the puzzle pieces that you need.
Totally. Yeah, that's the great thing about music. It means what it needs to mean to you at the time. And I think that record has like, has a real, the first record and that record have a real swagger, just like Liam walking down the street in his anorak with his hands behind his back, like fuck the world.
Right.
And I think I probably, as a dad with a super responsible, stressful job at the time, I needed a little amplify my swag a little bit. We
kind of jumped right in. I usually start like this.
Okay.
For people who are watching or listening that don't know who you are, will you tell them what your name is and why they should know you?
My name's Dave Dederer, and I'm from Seattle, and I played lots of music since I was a teenager, and I'm best known for playing guitar in the rock and roll group, the Presidents of the United States of America. So
technically, what was the instrument called?
On most of the recordings, I'm playing a 3-string. We made up a name for it after we made it up, the git bass.
Git bass.
And whereas Chris played the 2-string bass guitar, as we called it. I liked git bass because Junior Brown had the git steel. So I borrowed his
bass
nomenclature. Yeah. And those instruments, to jump right in, were Chris was really, really good friends with Mark Sandman, who was in legendary Boston band Treater Wright, and playing guitar, and then played 2-string slide bass in his band Morphine that he kind of created, completely unique sound. 2-string slide bass, baritone sax, and drums. And some of the listeners may have seen them. They toured all over the place and played, theaters in the 90s.
Very cool band.
Yeah, so Chris lived after finishing high school. He went to college in upstate New York, and then he lived in New York and Boston for 7 or 8 years. And he and Mark became good friends. They'd smoke weed and,
do those improv shows.
You do make 4-track recordings all day and then do these improv shows. And the deal at the improv show is Mark would usually give you know, he'd show up with some combination of weirdly strung instruments, including maybe a 2-string bass or 3-string guitar or 4-string guitar. And then the drummer, and this is kind of where we landed with Jason having, especially when we started, really taped up drum kit and only a splash cymbal.
Yeah.
Mark's rule for the drummer, they used to play these gigs at some Irish pub in Boston. They just played for free Guinness all night. Drummer couldn't have any cymbals. So you could have wood blocks and cowbells and anything, because the cymbals just make too much fucking noise, right? They're just guitar killers, vocals killers. Yeah. So that was kind of the genesis. And actually there are a few President songs that the kernel of them came from those jams.
Right.
Yeah, and you know the funny thing about playing that 3-string, so it's just the root, the fifth, and the octave above.
Right.
And I didn't realize
and it's in C sharp.
C sharp, and that was really just because we had these, you know, usually like crappy harmony guitars with a bridge you could move around, and that was as low as we could get and still have decent intonation up at the 15th or 17th fret, because you got to go up there because you're not going across the neck. So anyway, I realized years later, like the first instrument I ever played, stringed instrument, so we didn't have a piano in our house. My mom, being kind of a late to the hippie thing, in like 1970 bought a dulcimer. And a dulcimer, I played the electric dulcimer in the Presidents. A dulcimer is tuned. Sometimes there are 2 courses of strings on the top and has 4 strings, but often just 3 strings, the root, the fifth, and the root. And I'm like, oh, no wonder this is like natural to me, because I used to just sit there and mess around on the dulcimer in my lap.
Right.
When I was a little kid. It's probably the first instrument I really messed around with. So,
were you a school band kid later?
No, Chris and I both went to this small independent school, the Bush School, and there were instruments around and people playing music.
I didn't know you guys went to school together.
Yeah, from middle school through high school. But we weren't friends in high school and middle school. He was a year behind me.
Still hate each other.
Well, it is funny. I consider Chris to be a brother, and I have deep, deep love for him. But except until the last few years, we almost never hung out outside playing music. And we started playing music, it was the summer after he graduated. So I had done 1 year of college. And like from the moment, the first notes we ever played together, we had like that instant kismet, where you're just like, it's just on. Like we understood each other. And we always had that. And we'd been doing that for 10 years before what became the Presidents started. So we always had this incredibly close, like complementary interest and skills in music, but the Venn diagram overlapped. But we've never really like Jason and I hung out with a lot more. I'd go play poker every Tuesday night and go to the Comet
But that's pretty rare. Like when you're in a band with someone, once a band starts touring,
it's true,
and you are always with one another.
Yeah.
Then when you come home, it's like,
yeah,
okay, cool,
see you in 2 months.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think we always maybe that's why we always just did enjoy hanging out together. And we were just lucky. It's lucky when you get, because we've all been, since we're in high school, like, I know if we get Jeff super into country and Bobby super into funk and Jimmy, and we're going to get in a room and it's going to be this fucking amazing amalgam of everything. And you get in a room and it's just like,
wet fart.
Yeah, and it's just lucky. It's like any team you've ever been on. Like like when it gels, it gels. So Chris and Jason and I just had that. It was just lucky.
It was a pretty magic
from
scenario.
The moment, Chris and I already had it, and he moved back to Seattle for good in the fall of '93, and we did what we'd always done. I was sharing a rehearsal space at the time on Capitol Hill just so I could go up myself with people. I think was like Flop, 7 Year Bitch, the Posies maybe all had a space.
You were in Chop House.
No, there was a place like on
down
like
by the Puss?
Yeah, that place.
What was it called?
I don't remember.
Was it not called the Chop House?
It's like a hair salon now.
Kaz and Jackie had it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in there too.
Yeah. So I was in there and so Chris came back. I'm like, I got a rehearsal space. We each have some songs. Let's just do what we always do, which is get together. And so we played 8 or 10 shows without Jason. Chris had really, really bad tinnitus, and he still does from just playing too much loud music in the basement of an apartment building in a, cement block room. So he's like, I don't even know if I want to ever play with a drummer again. And then the running joke was Jason, who of course I've known since he was in high school and I was maybe 18. He had seen an earlier band that Chris and I had called Go. And it's a long story, but we did some gags at a show that he came to, including me giving him a lap dance during a really loud guitar solo on an acoustic guitar, and baseball flung across the room, me catching it. And, you know, he enjoyed the show, and he's like, next band you guys have, I'm going to be the drummer. Next band, you know, because he's a big rock star guy, right? He's Pope of Pike Street. He's the drummer in Love Battery. So that was the running joke for like 3 or 4 years. Like, next band you have, I'm the drummer. Next band you have, the drummer. So then Chris comes back, and all of a sudden we got this weird little duo, and people are really into it. Jason's like, yeah, you guys need a drummer. And Chris, I remember having long, do we really want to have a drummer? It's going to be too loud. We're going to...
Right.
Yeah. And finally, you were saying it was magic. Like, okay, let's play with Jason. I'll never forget.
No rehearsal.
I mean, we rehearsed one. We really didn't need to rehearse, but the first time we rehearsed, it was like, oh, this is fucking... He, you know, you've played with him. He's so, he doesn't sound like Keith Moon, but he has in common with Keith Moon that he can do things that drummers aren't supposed to do, which is play accents, for example, that are related to the vocal line and stuff, and be musical in a really expressive way, but still have a killer groove. So he was just like the perfect...
And his drumming also punctuates the fun.
Totally.
It's like an exclamation point.
Well, not unlike
any pun.
One of my favorite musicians, Pete Thomas from Elvis Costello and the Attractions, where, you know, there are some Attractions albums where like just the snare drum hooks alone, you know, all over his army, you know, just little things like that. And then like all our personalities, like Chris, you got to have the weirdo artist guy in every band, right? The guy who just can put his editor aside and just express. Then Jason was the raconteur and networker and man about town, and I was the fucking super competitive, ambitious type A asshole. And then you combine all that, and it was just lucky that we had both the musical compliments and the kind of like business, for lack of a better way to describe it, just the stuff that's required to make it go. Yeah, you got to have all of it.
Do you remember that I guitar teched for the last 2 or 3 shows
that I played?
You did?
I'm a somewhat restrained person, and I have not done that many things in my life that I find deeply embarrassing. But actually, you were there for one of my top 5 most embarrassing moments in my life.
Wow.
We were playing the Crystal Ballroom.
Yeah.
And who opened with Carrie and Friel?
Goodness?
Yeah, it was Goodness, wasn't it?
Oh, I don't know.
They were killer. And I was playing at that time. I had gotten back that Blackface twin reverb that was my best friend Kermit Rosen's.
I can't believe that amp.
So that's the amp I made our first record with. When I made our first record, I didn't own the guitar or the amp. Kermit had that guitar in Slack. He was in this band that were super popular in the Northwest in the late 80s and early 90s. Anyway, I had that amp. I remember vividly. I had my little pedal board always had an overdrive, a big muff, and a Phase 90. I was having some signal problem, and you were trying to help me fix it. And later, after the show, we eventually figured out it was the input jack on the Phase 90 was loose.
Right.
And I just got super pissed and ended up, I think the amp we had it back on its legs, and I think I kicked it over in a fit of pique.
Wow.
And it was really just a dickhead thing to do. It was not nice to you because you were trying to make me sound good, and it was just totally
also potentially
childish.
Damaging to that amazing amp. Do you still have it?
Kermit has it in his basement somewhere, yeah. It is an amazing amp. So
I've never heard a twin reverb sound like that.
It sounded good, and you know that amp, it had mismatched speakers in it. Certainly, I think even at that gig, but when we recorded with it, I think one of the speakers was only held on with one bolt.
Right.
It was like
barely alive.
But it was like a 64 or 65 Blackface twin reverb.
It sounded so fucking good.
Yeah, it did.
And to this day, when I think about, well, if I need a loud amp, I think about that amp, and I'm like, I wonder if I could. And the truth is, it's a terrible idea for any reasonable person, but you guys we're an unreasonable band.
Yeah, we
in
were
every
doing.
way.
I didn't tour with that amp. We got we signed a record deal, and I knew it was Kermit's. I didn't want to take it, and I ended up buying a dual rectal fryer, which was great actually. I just used it because it had 46L6s in it, right?
Sure.
Guitar Geeks.
You go through the clean channel. And...
Yeah, I just used the clean channel, and it was a great. I have to say that amp, Mesa Boogie. Thank you for the support many years ago. That amp played, hundreds and hundreds of shows all around the world for 3 years. It never once had even the slightest problem. Got flown to Australia, Japan, Europe multiple times. So that was as close as I felt like I could get.
Our friends next door over at Gibson Guitars bought Mesa, and I bet you might be able to talk to them at some point.
Those.
Maybe.
I do like, honestly, if I still had a guitar tech and somebody to move my shit for me in the four bands I'm in, no, I would play a twin at every show, even quiet shows. There's something about the cabinet shape and the 212s and the big transformer and the 46L6s. It does something that no other amp does, and I tend to like a clean sound. And it does a weird clean sound.
Big, full,
and like it doesn't need any grind to it because it's got some weird, like, secret psycho, can't hear it, implied grind. And no other amp does it. It's true. Even if you take the head, I had a dual Showman head for a while. You take the head and put it through it doesn't do it. It's something about that cabinet shape. And
when you put a big muff through a twin.
Oh my God.
It is a glorious fucking racket. Oh my God.
It's a thing of beauty.
Yes.
Yeah, no, you hear that sound like that's what Junior Brown plays. I think he played through one or two Silverface twins with volume knob, and I think he has them dimed, and he just uses the volume knob, and it's a ferocious, life-changing sound. Anyway, so the blah, 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 I'm Dave Dederer. I was in the presidency of the United States of America. Enough about me.
Well, you're the guest.
Oh, that's right. So anyway, yes, I remember you teching some of the last shows that I played, and actually Andrew, who then came on and kind of took my place, he did a few too, just to kind of get the lay of the land. I remember him coming on a trip to the East Coast and teching a few shows just so he could watch
shadow.
Shadow a little bit. Yeah.
I went on to stage manage with that lineup, and I was the worst road person.
Because?
Well, I'm not a very employable person. I'm pretty unemployable. Yeah. And at that time, I still drank.
I think of you as unimpeachable, not unemployable.
Both. I'm both.
Unimpeachably unemployable. So you were drinking.
I was still drinking.
And Andrew was.
It was it was party time.
Yeah.
It was party time.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, probably. I brought the pain for sure.
I thought, and for the presidents at least, he went with us for a lot of years, and I'm getting to play music again with him now. Mike Musburger was a really good choice because really we just needed help with drums, and Mike could deal with all the drum stuff.
That's one thing I can't tune it.
Right. Yeah, he could, and we'd show up at some TV gig or some radio thing with a pile of hardware and shells and bad drum heads, and in like 10 minutes, Mike would have the kit up and sounding good.
Right.
Guitars, basses, amps, you just plug them in and
they're fine.
Yeah. The player has to take it from there.
I've talked to everyone I feel like the president's story is pretty well documented on this podcast.
Good.
I want to talk a little bit about your experience with it, but I want to you did a lot of pretty interesting things in the music industry after.
I have had many careers, including 15 plus years in the digital music environment. Yeah. I did some stuff.
So you recorded that first album at Egg.
Yeah.
Which I love. I've recorded there a few times.
Yeah. R.I.P.
The Bachelors made their first record there.
Oh, yeah.
And of course Conrad is
who's still a close friend.
A genius and
You got to
sweet
go
man.
visit him. He and Emily moved to Aravaca, Arizona about full time 5 or 6 years ago.
So he could be close to spring training?
Well, the whole thing was they always did go down to spring training for 2 or 3 weeks, and then they would go birding, and they found this little weird town, Aravaca, which is like half rednecks, half hippies. So they kind of fit right in. And they bought the dance hall, which is a like 100-plus-year-old building that's been a brothel, a general store, trading post. And they bought this building and turned it into a community center / dance hall. And I finally got down there. It was the 1-year anniversary of opening it. And Jenna, my girlfriend, and I were down there in November. And I sat in at the show, which was all the local musicians having a little bit of a hootenanny,
What were they doing?
playing guitar and singing and such. And Conrad even played the bass, which he was always reluctant to do, even though he is a bass player. Aravaca, Arizona, I recommend it. The Aravaca Dance Hall. Yeah, it's like 20 miles from the Mexican border, south of Tucson.
Right.
Straight south, like near, what's the town down there? Tubac, that everybody knows.
Aravaca translates to "you're almost there."
Yeah, you're almost there. Yeah. Look out for Border Patrol. Look out for vigilante Border Patrol.
Vaca is VACA. That's
VACA.
That's cow.
Yeah, Arivaca. I don't know what that translates to.
I don't know.
Anyway, it's a beautiful place. Kind of high.
Well, you said
mountain
hippies.
desert.
It probably means high cows, like
Maybe
stoned cows.
I just know we were there for we were in our van, so we camped in their driveway. We went to the cantina before the show, and Jenna and I quickly made friends. I think we had 2 or 3 rounds of drinks bought for us within the first 20 minutes. I was like, okay.
So you love it there.
I loved it. It was awesome. It was great. Friendly people, interesting music. Yeah. Anyway, yes, we made the first record at Egg Studios.
You guys made that record. I think you guys were doing the thing at, what was the place on Lower Queen Anne called?
We did. We went, the laundry room story. I don't know if you covered that with Chris and Jason. That's a great story. But we did make a 10-song. It wasn't a demo because we didn't feel like we needed a demo. We made a 10-song cassette in a day with Barrett Jones, who was Dave Grohl's good friend and drum tech for years, and who recorded the first Foo Fighters record in that same weird. I mean, that place was like plywood walls about to fall down. 8-track. We recorded 10 songs in like 6 hours, 2 or 3 of which the tracks made it to the first record. Yeah, we did that because we were like, did you hear the story of how we got the $350 for that? It's a great story from Chris. There was a guy.
Retail.
There was a guy. Why am I blanking on his name? Oh, Evan. Evan Blackstone, who we met because the first couple times we played at the Romper Room, which then became Tiny Bags, which then became a mixed use development for Amazon tech workers, which is what it is now. We played there a few times, and Evan kind of booked it, but then he also he had a super successful valet parking business at a couple high-end restaurants. And sometime after we'd played a couple shows at the Romper Room with Jason, the full lineup, Chris was somewhere out and about, ran into Evan, and Evan's like, oh my God, I just had this horrible like road rage incident. This guy and I almost ran into each other. We almost got in a fist fight. It was a fucking nightmare situation. I feel like I need to do something really positive. Have you guys recorded yet? Chris is like, no. He's like, here's $350. Go make a record. Literally. And we're like, oh, we got $350. Let's go.
And $350 will buy you 10 hours at the laundry room.
Exactly. So we went in the laundry room and played 10 songs and mixed them in, 8 or 10 hours.
Right.
And made a little cassette, Froggy Style, which just came out on vinyl finally. And I think it's on streaming services too. And Jason sold them from behind the bar at the Comet. So we did that in like
Froggy Style.
Yeah, we did that in like the fall of. Oh, no, when did we do that? We did that sometime.
Did Evan get an executive producer credit?
No, he got a gold record or a platinum record, but
that's pretty sweet.
So we played our first show. Chris moved back the fall of '93. We played 8 or 10 shows in the matter of a couple months. Jason played the first show with us. Was like it was at the Romper Room, because then we played New Year's Eve that year at the College Inn pub. And then we must have made these recordings within a month or two later, because Chris then went on tour with Beck playing bass and guitar. And we were selling these things at a show or two, and then Chris left, and Jason was selling them behind the Comet. And pretty soon, in like a couple weeks, we'd sold like 500 of them. I mean, it helped that Jason was tending bar 6 nights a week, playing it on repeat.
Selling
at the
to drunk
Comet.
people.
Yeah, selling them to drunk people. And then, you know, we didn't really know if we were a real band, and Chris was on tour, and we were like, we need to play some shows, because we're selling hundreds and hundreds of these cassettes, and everybody wants to book us. And then he got kicked out of Beck's band and came back, and then we recorded that record, the first record, the rest of it at Uno's in the fall of 1994. But you remember that summer, Jason was in Love Battery, and they made a record for A&M that summer.
Right.
So this was still just like, oh, okay, well, I guess we'll go for fun.
Fun side thing.
Yeah, and they were about to put out what became Straight Freak Ticket on Atlas, which was an A&M subsidiary. It was a great record, by the way. Go listen to Straight Freak Ticket by Love Battery. And Jason was like, yeah, I guess it's just for fun. We'll go make a record. And so we went to Uno's, and kind of, I don't know, it just kind of, that Labor Day weekend of 1994, somebody's like, hey, you guys want to be on some ASCAP showcase? It was Bumbershoot weekend, so industry people were here. And we played this ASCAP showcase, and the next day, this guy, Tim Summers from Atlantic, tried to sign us. And it was like 6 months of just getting assaulted by record labels, lawyers, publishers.
Those romper room shows, after the first show, there was a line around the block.
I can't. I mean, we had our little built-in crew from Pike Street, but all of a sudden, I don't. And it was weird, you know. We weren't cool at all. We weren't on the cover of the Rocket immediately.
Long-haired.
Yeah, no, we were not. And the audiences,
serious.
Yeah, the audiences were really atypical. The audiences were a little older and mixed, like everything from frat sorority kids to like 40-year-old, old people,
metalheads,
and
like everyone. Like there was, I
do remember with the first show we played with Jason was at the Romp Room, and it was with the Kent Three, Seattle punk rock legends. Who were a great band themselves. And I remember we did our weird little thing. The Romp Room had no stage really. And like we finished our set, and I literally was like carrying my effects and the Twin off the stage with my guitar around my neck. And I can't remember which one of the guys in the Kent Three, he just looked at me and said, that was the single greatest rock and roll show I've ever seen in my life. And I was like, whatever, dude.
I felt that way about almost every show that I saw. And I saw you guys did a show at the mural.
Oh, yeah.
That must have been 94.
Yeah, I think
right?
We did play there that summer. Like, yeah, the whatever, what did they call that stage when KISW? Yeah, Jeff Gilbert booked that for years. Yeah, we did that.
It was, I remember I heard about it. I was like, oh, okay, awesome. Like, I'm going to go down. That'll be an easy show to see and it was overrun with humans.
I do remember that show.
It was wild. And it was the most, like, the hair on my arm standing up right now.
That's really sweet of you to say.
It was amazing.
It's fun. I feel like I can say it was amazing too, because I don't feel like, again, as I was saying at the start of the conversation, it's just serendipity that you find. It's not about like, I'm amazing, or Chris is amazing, or Jason is amazing. They are amazing. I can't speak for myself, but it was the combination of the three of us and our ability to collectively, you play music very well. It's like, it's not about you. It's tapping into something bigger, and you're a translator as a musician. You're like which sounds too corny to say shaman, but you're like you spend time and energy building a skill set where you learn to tap into a capability to take the chaos in the world and turn it into what for 3 minutes at a time is this like orderly, organized space-time thing, right?
Sure.
You're a translator. So I don't feel like, I feel very proud of what we did, but I feel like it's not ego,
right.
I was lucky to be part of it, to tap in and be in the same place with those two guys at the same time and have us have that connection.
That was a steep trajectory. It was just like boom, rocket ride, right?
Yeah, totally.
Do you remember the first big show where you felt like, oh shit, this isn't a game?
There were a couple moments. So as I said, it was a rocket ride. Chris came back at the end of 93. We just, as I said, it's what we always did. Like, let's get together with 4-track. And all of a sudden we're booking shows. Scott McCoy wants to book us as often as possible at the Crocodile. This is before Jason even starts playing. This is in the matter of like 6 or 8 weeks.
Right.
I just started grad school. So I'm like working 10 hours a day at grad school and also trying to make some money on the side doing some like writing stuff. So we're doing it, and then in the spring of 93 we've made a 10-song to Chris takes off for 5 months with Beck. Then he comes back, and then all of a sudden, and then my second year of grad school, we made the record. I'm sure, I mean, a lot of it was just weird. Like, we played that show on Labor Day, the ASCAP showcase at Moe's, and like a week later, we were in Hits magazine. And then we were in Hits magazine like often that year as we were getting courted. But I was trying to do well in school, and, I'd just go out and have 3 scotches and play a show twice a month, and it was really fun. But that year, then all of a sudden, we're going to, like every 6 weeks, we're going to LA or New York for a week and doing showcases and interviewing lawyers. And I think there were a few moments. One was at South by Southwest that spring, where we slept, thank you, Michael Badamy, for the millionth time, who was at ASCAP at the time, and been in the industry for years. He let us sleep on the floor of his suite in the Four Seasons. He and his wife were in the bedroom. The 3 of us were on the sofa and the floor. Seemed normal at the time. But I remember, that was in old South by. That was where all the industry people hung out, in the lobby of the Four Seasons. And none of us could walk through the lobby for 4 days without getting a drink bought for us, dinner bought for us, lunch bought for us, breakfast bought for us by either label, publisher, attorney, booking agent.
What a time.
Yeah, somebody. And then we played that, I didn't realize it actually until going back later. Like, every year there's 1 or 2 acts that everybody's there to see. Like, oh, we were that act. And then the other moments were, there were a couple funny ones. I think the really weird one was, we signed a record deal. We committed to Sony Music in May of 95. Donnie Einer, who was president of Sony USA at the time, was like, I'll have your record out by mid-July, which he did. I finished grad school, and I'm like, I don't know, I guess we'll go. Like, we're going to go do some promo tour thing and whatever. Maybe I'll write my thesis in a month. And there were a couple moments. We made the video. Roman Coppola came up here. We made the Lump video in June or July. And it's still all like hypothetical at that point. Right. And I knew there was buzz in the industry. But then they pre-released the record and the single at the start of July. The record came out the 3rd week of July. And we started this crazy promo tour that Chris or Jason may have told you about, where we flew somewhere and played on the street and on flatbed trucks in, 20 cities.
That suitcase drum kit.
Suitcase drum kit. It was crazy. And there were a few moments on that trip where I was like, holy shit. There were we were going to stations, radio stations, and we were going to one stops, which were the CD warehouse places, and playing for people and doing events for like buyers from Tower and stuff. And, there were a couple moments on that. One was the video came out on maybe the first week in August, and I don't know if you remember what was it? Friday nights was Buzzbin new videos,
sure.
And our manager Stacy's like, okay, you guys are gonna be the first video on Buzzbin this Friday. And Chris and I were sharing a hotel room, and I remember, it came on. We'd seen it, of course, but not with the Chiron really announced. And like
on the TV.
Yeah, and the song's 2 minutes long. And the first minute, I'm like, we're, jumping up and down on the beds, literally. Like, oh my fucking God. And then there was a weird moment, like halfway through, like, okay, everything that was weird and distinctive about us, which was why we were talking about this weird audience that would come see us, which was metalheads and frat kids and, like Dungeons and Dragons people. Because our shows were like this weird improvised cabaret act, basically. And I'm like, oh, we're just the three goofy dudes in the suits. We're just another tube of Clearasil. We're just another can of Mountain Dew. We're just another youth product. So that was a moment. But then there were some other moments on that. So we were doing everything from like going to some stations that weren't playing us at all and setting up on their boardroom table and basically like flipping them off and playing Lump and Peaches, to some big stations had added us, including WHFS in DC, which at the time was the three biggies were WHFS, 99X in Atlanta, and K-Rock in LA, were the tastemakers for commercial alternative. And HFS had started playing the song. So we're going to do another promo thing. It's at the Inner Harbor in Baltimore. There's some amphitheater. We're just going to set up. And we'd been doing these. And, we'd done some in LA, like in the 3rd Street Promenade. Hundreds of people had shown up. That was a moment where like 1,000 kids showed up, or 1,500 kids.
Right.
Like, what the fuck? Also in Vancouver, on that trip, we went up to Vancouver and we went to an HMV or something on Robson Street, the main high street there. And the Sony guy picked us up and he's like, okay, you guys actually are going to have to hide in the back seat under blankets. I brought blankets and we're going to have to go in through the alley in the back. And, he drove us in through the back. We went in. They filled the store. So there were some of these promo events where it was like they filled the store, but then we look outside and Robson Street was shut down because like 2,000 kids had showed up on the street. And we started our thing. We were playing next to big plate glass windows by the front door, and the kids were pressed up a plate. We got in like a song and a half into it, and we had to pull the plug because these kids were going to like come through the window on top of me. And we did one also in New York on that same promo trip where we did a downtown Tower Records, or like down near Gramercy Park. And I remember they turned the CD racks around to make kind of a corridor for people to be in. I'll never forget, we played, and then there was a full-on fucking riot, and kids were like stole as many CDs as they could, and it was just complete.
Good for them.
Yeah. So there were a few on that promo tour. It was like, oh,
right,
this is getting weirder and weirder.
Any festival dates?
Not early on.
No.
No, at the end of that tour, we did some weird ones, like that station, the old commercial alternative station in Portland had one, and we went and did that. We did like, right when we got back, we did some weird event at Shaney, like at the stadium in Tacoma, Brewstock or one of those, but no big festivals right off the bat.
Second record Europe festivals? Anything?
We did Europe festivals, actually. The biggest ones were, some of which the band revisited in the 2000s after I stopped touring. But we did a bunch of big ones in the summer of 96 when the record was at its peak. Like we did it's the Rock M series, and it's Rock M Ring and Rock M Park. Yeah. We did that back-to-back thing. We did Pink Pop, which the band did again, main stage on Pink Pop. We did a bunch of other, like 50 to 120,000 person festivals, which are, and when I try to, I still go to the footage from Pink Pop in 1996 to try to share with people, like, do you know how fucking weird this was?
Which stage were you guys?
We're on the main stage.
It's a wild thing.
There are like 100,000 people there. And the closest person is,
45 feet away.
At least, yeah. And at the end of the set, I had a wireless at the time. I jumped down to the camera platform, and then I jumped down to the pit and run along and, high-five the crowd and let them slap my guitar. And those shows, you've played those shows there. Those shows are so weird. It's so hard to explain to people because you have no sound check. You have no line check. You're playing some of the biggest shows of your life, and you're on a stage that is literally the size of a basketball court. Right? It's the weird. It's like, I describe it as operating a piece of heavy machinery. It's not really playing music. It's like,
not a Miata.
No, it's definitely not a Miata. It's not a 2,200 pound sports car. It's like a Cat D7. You're just like.
I mean, just the sheer power of the PA is something. And if you're out in front and you can actually feel the subs, it's it's a crazy experience.
And it can make certain kinds of, like, there are certain kinds of music that I would never choose to go to an event like that as a fan, but we're playing them, so I'm there. Like, I never was that Pink Pop show. I never got Rage Against the Machine. I was like, whatever. Rage
It really
Against the Machine.
translates.
Oh my God. They're one of my favorite bands over the last 25 years because they played, I think, right after us at Pink Pop, and they came out, and there's 90,000 people just immediately, and I was like, these guys are fucking amazing.
1 billion watts of public address.
So awesome. I mean, it was incredible. So certain things translate, in that environment that just work. So yeah, those shows are weird. But yeah, early on it was like, oh, I guess this is.
Do you have a favorite venue you've ever played? Do you have a place where you're most comfortable, that you love, that feels like when you play there, you feels like home?
I really liked the old Crocodile Room just because we played there so many times and I saw so many shows, and Jim was such a great sound guy and the whole vibe. And I loved, of any club I've been in the world, that layout. I don't know why more people don't emulate it. It was an accident there, but you could be in the showroom, 500 people maybe when it's packed.
Yeah.
Then they had the little restaurant area where if you were sort of interested in the band playing at the time or just wanted to hear one song, you could hang out there and drink a beer or have some fries and bullshit. Yep. And then if you just wanted to fucking drink or hang out, you could go in the back room and wait until whoever you wanted to see or not see anybody.
Right.
So as a place to hang out, I thought that was the ideal place ever. Places to play. Any of those theaters that were built from the 20s through the 40s, like whether it's the Paramount, whether it's the Moore in Seattle or the Fox in Detroit or the Warfield in San Francisco, those are just incredibly well-designed buildings. And they were obviously designed so people could even project acoustically. But you can, though, I really like playing those venues. And
you can see everyone.
You can see, I was just going to say, especially like at the Moore, which is so steep, you can see every person's face.
It's awesome.
Yeah. And worst venues, God, we did 2 nights. I mean, other than playing in, like school gymnasiums at colleges and stuff, we did 2 nights in LA when we were at our peak, would have been sometime in 95 or 96. And we played I can't even remember the name of the venue. It was an old armory, like where the Museum of History and Industry is now, just a big concrete building. And we did 2 nights there to like 4,000 people each night.
The worst.
There was a great, cool venue in Australia, Hordern Pavilion. It was in Sydney, if I remember right. And then we played our first show in Australia ever. I think it's called Festival Hall in Melbourne, which is where the Beatles played. That was a pretty great night. Any of those old rooms that are mostly wood, like Showbox is a great one too.
Didn't you guys open for Tom fucking Petty at the Warfield?
We did 3 nights or 4 nights with Tom Petty at the Fillmore as part of his estate the label just released it in the last year. That was like Tom Petty at the Fillmore. Did you get those stories out of Chris and Jason? He asked us. It's a great story. So Chris has a great song, Mixed Up Son of a Bitch, that came out on a later President's record that I didn't plan. Not a great version, in my opinion, relative to his earlier 4-track versions. Amazing song. She's a mixed up son of a bitch. She's a mixed up. Anyway, and somehow we got connected with Tom Petty for a soundtrack song for some Jennifer Aniston movie, and Chris sent him the demo of that song because it's a Tom Petty song. It would be killer with him singing it. And then our manager Stacy's like, well, Tom likes the song and he wants to talk to you guys. He's going to call you. And I was at home at the time in Seattle with my ex Darcy, and she picks up the phone one morning. We're back from tour and she's like, yeah. Oh, can I tell him who's calling? It's fucking Tom Petty! And I get on the phone and he's like, hey, Dave, it's Tom. And you picture him, he's like He's somewhere
on a
in
velvet
Laurel
couch.
Canyon.
Yeah.
Exactly. He's on a velvet couch at 11 in the morning, baked out of his mind. There's like fucking...
He's got a bathrobe on.
Exactly. Tapestries and Persian rugs hanging from the walls.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's exactly where he was. So he and I had 2 or 3 great, just like chill conversations. Like, oh yeah, I really love that song. And then some months later, he did this thing where he did 3 weeks every night at the Fillmore, and he invited artists that he liked, including some of his favorite young bands.
Right.
You haven't heard the story in the whole like...
I've heard it from Jason.
But Jason didn't tell you this story because it involves not really making fun of Pearl Jam, but something we did that... Anyway, which he would never, he's way too politic to do, and I'm not afraid of putting my foot in my mouth.
Okay.
So Petty
Great.
says, will you guys do this? And I want you to close the last 3 nights. So it's amazing. Like 2 of the nights, fucking John Lee Hooker plays before us. Like, okay, yeah, John Lee Hooker's
Christ.
open. He's like in the next, they had these weird, the band had all the real green rooms, and they'd set up in the balcony these little curtained off green rooms. So we had one of those, and we're next to John Lee Hooker. Hey, how you boys doing? You know, and he goes out, boom, 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 boom before us. I'm like, right, yeah, we're gonna follow that. You know, great. Sammy Hagar was there. Jason hung out with him. I had a great time drinking and watching. You know, and there was another great non-show moment, which was. We had a little curtained off area, and one night, I can't remember if it was just me and Jason sitting there, or maybe me and Bunsberger. The curtain opens, it's Boz Scaggs. Just walks in. He walks in, we had, you know, the usual plastic tubs full of beer.
I love Boz Scaggs.
I love his singing. I'd heard previously that he thinks highly of himself, which he should, because if I could sing like that, I would think highly of myself too. He walks in, he doesn't say anything to us. He walks in front of us, past us, over to where the beers are on ice. He does, you know, like when you grab like 3 or 4 between your knuckles, he grabs as many as he can grab, 4 or 6, turns and looks at us and just sort of laughs at us like, huh, and walks out with his hands
I don't
full
like him.
of beer,
I don't like him
beers.
enough to let him do that in my room.
Well, yeah, what are you going to say? Like, you're fucking Boz Scaggs.
I say, this ain't Slim's, bitch.
I was
You do the Lido shuffle on out of
Yeah,
here.
you Lido. I was not self-possessed enough. So those were some of the sidelight things. But so on to the great story. So first night, Petty gets on stage before us and gives us this like long, really nice introduction. This is one of my favorite young bands. These guys really have this true spirit of rock and roll, blah, 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 blah. So he comes off stage. Now, here's the story. So we had this thing from the first show we played at the Romper Room with Jason. For some reason, spontaneously, right before we went on stage, we're like, okay, we're doing it on stage. We got to like get it together. And as you'll recall, the first Pearl Jam record, 10, they all have their arms together in a gatefold, right? In this aspirational pose where they're all like teamwork. So for some reason, we made fun of that, and we put our pinkies together and said, okay, let's do it 8 bazillion. And we put our pinkies together and we said 8 bazillion. Okay, every show we played for years, we always did that right before we went on stage. For some reason, it just became the thing. We put our pinkies together and say 8 bazillion. It was our own little inside joke.
Right.
So Petty introduces us. He walks off stage. He's like, have a good show, you guys. And he's a couple steps past us, and we do our thing. And he turns around, he's like, what are you guys doing? And I tell the story that I just told you, and he's like, yeah, that's pretty funny. I want in. And he puts his finger in, and he's like, 8 bazillion. And we go up and play the show. Okay, it was 3 nights. Wow. Second night, he walks off stage and is down the steps behind the curtain. And he gets a few steps behind us, and he turns around, he's like, wait a second. We got to do our thing. And he comes back and puts his pinky in. Yeah, 8 bazillion. Third night, he just walks down the stairs and just comes straight over to us and puts his pinky out. He's like, all right, let's go. 8 bazillion.
You guys didn't add 2.75 bazillion because there was a 4th person?
Oh, we should have. We should have rounded up for sure. So that is the Tom Petty. But we did get to open those nights, which I'm a massive Tom Petty fan. I have to say, as a fan... Sorry, Tom, R.I.P. It was slightly disappointing because Stan Lynch had just left the band, and Steve Ferroni, who's a phenomenal drummer, was playing. But the sound of any great band, in my opinion, is the drummer and the singer. That's the greatest bands. They're distinguished. Of course. You can just go through it, right? Charlie Watts, Ringo, Keith Moon, Bonham. And then what elevates a band, in my mind, usually to greatness is both the singing and the drumming are distinctive and amazing. And Stan Lynch had that thing that, like, you just think of that little half bar fill at the start from Damn Torpedo's biggest hit, Refugee. Da, 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 da. He had
Right.
that rolling shuffle thing that he could do that is inimitable. So there were 3 great shows.
Yeah.
Almost all covers, really fun.
Whoa.
Every night Mike Campbell had a step out. We had a gold
I'm a huge
jazz
Mike
master.
Campbell fan.
Oh my God, he did Goldfinger every night. Tom would leave the
I
stage.
think he's the unsung hero of
Well, his band was on tour over the last year or two and
Dirty Knobs.
hit Dirty Knobs. And Bill Malloy, who I play with in one of the bands I'm in now, went down to California and his drummer was out and they did like 3 shows with Stan Lynch. Oh my God, I wish I'd
heard
gone to
about
those and
that.
said it was
I
phenomenal.
saw them play once at NAMM, and it was fucking awesome.
No, Mike Campbell's stylistically, he doesn't do what it's not in my wheelhouse, but his intent, which is to serve the song and make the music better, and it's not about him, that's totally my MO. So I've always loved him.
He's a hero.
She's unbelievable. Those little parts that just make the song without having to be. And then I don't know if you've ever played in a bunch of bands we've been doing American Girl, that the triplets thing at the end in the solo, which is I can play sitting in my bedroom really well, but if you try to play it on stage and then you watch footage of him doing it in like 1978, 79, it's just like he's half asleep. Like so good.
I'm super jealous.
Yeah, I was pretty great. I mean, it's amazing. You've met tons and tons of your heroes and people who are legends, and usually you're happy to find out they're really cool and they're a music fan just like you, and they just want to talk about music and make cool shit.
Right.
It's been very rare that hasn't been the case when you meet someone like that, in my experience.
You guys you guys play a part in my meeting Duff for the first time because Duff was involved in the president's world tour.
Oh, he played bass on that when we made that weird one-off record, and he learned the whole record in like 90 minutes. Came to one rehearsal and played it perfectly. Of course,
That's how he is.
Yeah, he's a truly great musician. Yeah, and were you working at Jupiter that day when we shot?
I was just there because I was friends with Jason. He was in the the
The
Bachelors. So I was there, and that's the first time I met him.
Wacky! I didn't know that.
And now,
and then we made that Loaded record.
7 years on, I've been playing with Duff for 24 years.
Well, and then it was within that year that I played on almost that whole first Loaded record, and you came in and played guitar in a few songs. Yeah, that's right.
I had to bully my way onto that session.
Did you? I don't remember.
Nobody invited me to do anything.
I didn't remember that.
I just, I was drinking, and it's hard to take a drunk person super seriously.
I guess so. Yeah, you came in and played guitar, and I played a lot of guitar in that record.
Yeah.
That's kind of a cool record.
I think that's the best Loaded record.
Yeah, it sounds like a record.
Yeah.
We worked pretty hard on it. I helped rearrange a bunch of the songs. Martin, we did a lot of rehearsal and, rearranging and revising, and the songs were good too. He's got a thing.
Yeah.
He's got a million songs that, I remember him playing the demos for what was going to be his second solo record for Geffen. When pretty soon after he and I started hanging out together, after because we knew each other as kids, and we'd reconnected the first time the Presidents came through LA, and then in the later 90s we were spending more time together. And yeah, he gave me the cassette. It's like 20 or 30 songs that he recorded, I think, with Abel Boreal Jr. on drums.
Yes.
Like there's fucking it was really good, and it never saw the light of day. It was really cool. Like
There's
pretty there's one song that's on one of the new records, right? Yeah, that's what I thought. Tim Giulio told me that one of those songs was on.
I might have to cut that out. I don't know.
But then I think he also, he also said that Duff got the masters back to that record, maybe, or they were cool. I mean, they were cool recordings. They were kind of Killing Joke-esque in places, and
but they also had these beautiful, like, you know,
yeah,
there was a lot of beautiful musical movement on them.
Yeah,
it was really nice.
Yeah.
After the Presidents, tell me about your life.
Oh, well, you know, I had a life before that. I had a couple careers before. I mean, I kind of decided when I was like 19, halfway through college, like, oh, I could transfer to music school and get like a jazz guitar performance degree. Or I could, at that second year, I was going to the UW. And that was mid 80s, and the whole thing was sort of starting. And Kermit and I had a couple bands, and we were playing downtown at, you know, some of the venues that were around at the time. And that wasn't really my scene. There was a lot of heroin in Seattle at the time, and I was more into like hanging out with my friends and going climbing and being out in the woods. Like I liked playing music, but I didn't want to stay up till 3 a.m. with a bunch of junkies. That was not what I wanted to do.
Why not?
So anyway, you know how fun that is. So I kind of decided at that age, like, well, I'm going to play music for fun, not for a job. So I went on, I finished college. I was a teacher, coach, outdoor educator at a couple high schools for 5 or 6 years. And then I got into this kind of public affairs, public relations stuff around natural resource issues and went to grad school in land use planning. And then Chris moved home, and we just did what we always did.
Land use planning is what your degree was in.
It was my graduate degree. My undergraduate degree is in English. So, and then all of a sudden just, okay, let's start another band for fun, like we always did. And all of a sudden it became a thing. So then that sort of ran its initial course. So after that, well, immediately after we broke up, we started this Subset thing with Sir Mix-a-Lot, which should have been fucking massive. It was so good. The shows, there were a couple shows we played in Seattle, and also we did one little tour down the West Coast that, I mean, some of the shows when the Presidents were blowing up were pretty crazy.
There was a Showbox show that was storied.
Yeah, and then we played...
Maybe there was a Mural Amphitheater show.
Yeah, we did a Mural
also.
Amphitheater show. We played at the Croc. We played at the Phoenix. We did this tour down the West Coast, and we did a couple shows that were just like, oh my God, I've never seen like people taking off their clothes and just going nuts. But that fell apart. That was in like 99, 2000, 2001. And then we made that record that you were talking about where Duff played bass on the live recording we did of it. And, we were kind of ahead of the curve in terms of at least talking to all these, like that record, the live one-off thing that Duff played on was for an internet startup electronic record label. So we were kind of paying attention, and I was paying attention to all that. And then at the same time, God, I went back, had kids. My daughters were born 2000 and 2002. Then kind of wanted to just have a normal job again. I went back into public relations, public affairs with this company, Pyramid Communications, which is somewhat associated with Pearl Jam, because Nicole Vandenberg, who I helped start that company with in the early 90s with John Hoyt, my old friend who started the company. She's been Pearl Jam's sort of co-manager, philanthropic manager for 25, 30 years now. Anyway, so I went back into that world, and then the band started up again. And for a couple of years, I was doing like working full time, doing this public affairs job.
Weekend fly-ins.
Had 2 little kids and doing weekend flyouts, which is just a horrible fucking idea. And then the shit kind of hit the fan after 2 years of doing that. And I told Chris and Jason, like, I'm just going to take a break. And I didn't never quit.
Right.
It's like, I'm taking a 6-month break. And the next thing. So then I did that. But at the same time, I started to, like I said, we were always kind of ahead of the curve with this digital experiments, and we own our first record. and we got the rights to our first record back. We had licensed it. We and Conrad Uno own the masters, and the band owns almost all the publishing. So we got the rights back to it from Sony. It's a long, boring legal story, but we got the rights back right as kind of the iTunes store opened in 2004. So that was the impetus for the band getting back together again. It was like, oh, we're getting the rights back. Well, should we record 1 or 2 new songs if we're going to re-release it? Well, if we're going to record a couple new songs, maybe we'll make a whole new record. Well, maybe we should play a show. And that's how that happened. And through being involved in all that, I just got deeper and deeper into. I started speaking at conferences and on panels about digital music, and eventually got invited to join the advisory board of some digital music startups, one of which then in the end of 2006, I went to work at this venture capital backed mobile music startup, Melodio. And then that was kind of the next 15 years of my working life. I was there for 3 or 4 years. We created kind of at that time, you remember the cloud locker was going to be, everybody had invested billions of hours in their iTunes libraries. How are you going to get those in the cloud?
Yeah.
So we did an early cloud locker mobile access product. We sold the company to Hewlett Packard for a minor, wasn't like a big, huge payoff, but it was a minor win. And then I worked at Hewlett Packard Corporation for 2 years. And then
as a part of that deal.
Yeah, as a part of that deal. And they were still going to try to launch some music products, which just never quite happened. And then I had kind of a 2-year earn out as a key hire. And then at the end of those 2 years, I was like, well, what would it be like to work for a big company that's a little more in its growth period? And I had some connections at Amazon and just ended up interviewing there and ended up working at Amazon Music for 5 years. And then the last 4.5 years I was at Amazon, I worked in the Echo Alexa team. I did deals with outside music services and radio services like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Apple Music, Sirius XM to get those services available on Alexa-enabled devices, right? So they're distributed via Echo devices. So yeah, at Amazon Music, in those jobs, I did content licensing where I dealt with rights, scary stuff at the startup where we were operating in a somewhat gray area in terms of compulsory licenses. This is all super inside baseball music licensing shit. So we couldn't really afford to have a lawyer full time. So I was the one reading and interpreting all the law and dealing with that day to day. HP, I actually went and did a bunch of deals with labels and publishers that then kind of got the wool that they aborted the project. Amazon, I got hired to run the music licensing team. And then within a year, when I got hired, Amazon had no streaming service or plans. Within the first year I was there, we started that. And so then we had no music programming or editorial team. So I created that. So I sort of wrote the job description for that. Right. And then over the next 3 or 4 years, hired, like 10 or 15 people in the US and 30 or 40 people worldwide before I left the Amazon Music team and went to this other job in Echo Alexa. So I did all sorts of stuff.
Did you enjoy that job?
I loved it.
It seems like pretty like a challenge and also
super hard.
Yeah. You probably had a unique perspective because you'd been on both sides of the music,
I think I had I'm going to sound like fucking Liam Neeson in those movies where he's like, I have a particular set of skills. But I do have a weird, I have a high zoot undergraduate degree from a fancy college.
Sure.
And then I saw the music, so I, have some capability with sort of creative problem solving, I guess. And then I did learn everything about the music. So like I said, when I was 19, I decided I don't want to do this for a living. Even if you're successful, you get screwed. Well, eventually we had this opportunity and we embraced it. And so as we went into that, when I'm 30 signing a record deal, I'm like, this is a fucked business. I'm going to learn everything there is to know about this business to minimize the ass fucking that we're inevitably going to get, right? I want to do the best we can. So I had out of enlightened self-interest, learned everything I could about publishing, music rights and how they're administered and paid out, etc.
By the time you swung all the way around and you're like, okay, I'm on this other side of the fence now and I'm trying to make something happen, it's a lot easier to understand why deals look the way they do. Am I correct? Or...
I think so, and I also think, if you just look at the last 10 years, especially the evolution toward and final game of streaming services, the deals, if you know the nuts and bolts, they all make sense. And in fact, the deals, Spotify, unfortunately, especially initially, just did a really bad job of communicating with the artist community. And the problem that Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music have is the artists are like, I still streamed 1 billion streams and I only got $3. And like, don't complain to us, complain to your fucking record label, because they're the ones who are screwing you.
Yeah.
Because the record label's we're the record label.
They're getting paid.
We're getting paid. We own the masters to our first record, and we get, instead of whatever the label flows to us, we get the label share. And It's a very healthy business. And it's the most insane. A catalog music business these days is like, it's better than printing money. There's no distribution cost. There's no breakage. There are no returns, right? If you own the Bob Dylan catalog, the Bruce Springsteen catalog, et cetera, the Miles Davis catalog, you are operating that is a business that operates literally like a 99% margin. Those Sony Music is
24 hours a day.
24 hours a day.
Open for business.
Just printing money. So yeah, and a lot of it, and I actually think in a lot of ways, we've gone from the LP, cassette, CD as an acquisition-based model, right? So that in 1996, you bought that Smash Mouth record, and there's one good song on it, and you paid $15, and you listen to that song like 20 times on your CD, and then you put it away. Well,
I do love that song, by the way.
It's, their hit songs are as good as any pop songs ever recorded, I think. And then that same year, your massage therapist bought that Enya record, which she played 5,000 times over the next 3 years. She also only paid $15 for that, right? So now we're on a model where it's pay per play. So in some ways, it's kind of cooler. There's music actually gets compensated for its utility, which I think is kind of cool. And it's shifted if you talk to people who are at labels and stuff, it's like certain kinds of music, like Chris Ballou benefited from this with Casper Baby Pants, because if your kid's listening to a Casper Baby Pants record, they're listening to it all
on repeat.
Yes. So stuff like kids music, every ambient music, all these kinds of music are a much bigger piece of the like overall revenue pie now, because people actually use them over and over and over, right? And of course, it's shifted. As you know,
should we make an ambient record?
We should, or you should make a record, as you know now. Like up like 20 years ago, pop songs were all creeping up to be like 4 or 5 minute mixes. They're all like 2 minutes now, 2.5 minutes, because you're paid per play. Doesn't matter whether your song's 10 minutes long or 1 minute long, you get the same payment per play, right? So you want people to play that T-Swizz song 3 times in a row.
I should have brought you a copy of my solo record.
Yeah, so it's like Minutemen style. It's all
15-second songs.
I like the Guided by Voices Minutemen.
The whole record is 3 minutes 20 seconds.
Ambient, 15-second ambient songs.
No, that's all of the varieties of music. Bless you.
Anyway, so I did have this weird 15-year career, I guess, plus in digital media it was totally fun. I feel like I've never really given a shit about I don't need credit or recognition. What I care about is like, am I learning and growing kind of just intellectually? Am I reasonably well paid? Do I feel like I'm fairly paid? And do I feel like what I'm doing, I don't feel like I've ever done a job that didn't in some way add to the positive side of the karmic spreadsheet. Like teaching, working on these natural resource issues, playing music. I feel like they're kind of all the same.
I think about that spreadsheet a lot.
Do you? I do. I think about it all the time.
Like how does whatever I'm doing make me feel?
Yeah.
And is that feeling contagious?
Yeah.
And is it good?
Yeah,
Like
totally.
is this a good feeling that is making other people feel good?
Yeah,
If it's not,
yeah.
I don't really want to do it.
I
I don't want to have anything to do with it.
I've been lucky to do all this stuff and to have been pretty reasonably successful and, put my kids through college and all that, doing things that I believe in. And that through the music thing, I really feel, I did set sort of, as I moved into that, consciously set a goal like, okay, I want to be part of creating this new paradigm where art, creators can get paid and there's something for everybody and it's a little more transparent and it's happened, and I can claim a tiniest fraction of a tiny percent of credit, but I definitely wanted to do that and feel lucky to have done it. Yeah, that karmic spreadsheet did that. Well, I'll share one story and then I have a question for you. Because when I was starting to try to do normal work again in the early 2000s, I had a friend who was the head of creative at a big ad agency. He's like, "Oh, you should come in and meet this guy who runs planning, and that's the kind of where your skills would fit in, which is more like putting the campaigns together."
Right.
So I spent the day with this guy, super cool guy, British guy, super hipster. We ended the day and went and had lunch. Ended the day in his office, which has got like all the cool knickknacks in his corner office, beautiful. But they're working for T-Mobile and lottery tickets, they're a big ad agency. And I was like, and soda pop. And I'm like, name blank, like at the end of the, and I also knew him socially. Our kids were in like grade school at the time together. I'm like, at the end of the day, like, yeah, it's cool. Like you guys are shaping the culture. I get it. And that's what advertising and marketing does now. And you're part of the conversation. I like that. But at the end of the day, how do you feel about selling Mountain Dew to 8-year-olds?
Right.
And that was the end of the meeting. he couldn't face it, basically.
Well,
right?
Clearly you weren't the guy for the job either.
Clearly I was not the guy for the job. And clearly doing that level of compartmentalization was part of I've never been able to compartmentalize. I remember even going back to my first job teaching school, like being in an argument with older teachers. And I'm sure I was just a horrible little intolerable snot-nosed shit, but I'm like, why you got, and I remember some teacher saying to me, look, I'm this, I play this role at work, and then I go home, it was a teacher and a coach, and I'm like, I can't do that. I just can't. So my question for you, and it may be too probing, which is just when, like laying off the drinking and stuff, was that looking at the karmic spreadsheet, or did you feel like
eventually, like initially it was just survival.
Right. You were just killing yourself, just
for sure.
Yeah.
Like turning yellow.
Yeah.
Dying.
Right. Yeah.
And, years on now, it's given me a clarity to be able to see things in a way that I didn't see them before. And because a lot of filters were taken off, like I'm never hungover. So any reaction that I have to any interaction,
right,
like any of my reactions, even if they're emotional, I can at least back myself off and go, you're being ridiculous.
Right.
That's not how you really
You're not
feel.
just cranky and hungover. You're like, you're engaging in a
it's much
coherent
more
way.
rare that I will say something that I don't mean in a fit of anger.
Right. Which is nice.
I don't ever want to be that person.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be that person.
No.
Yeah. It's, it just makes it easier for me to be the best version of myself. And that's all I want to do.
Right.
I feel like that's everyone's job.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I could see that.
Because if I'm happy and you're happy and we go out and we interact with people, hopefully it's contagious.
Exactly. Yeah. because that's why you play music. Is there are sort of, you can drive positive, whirlwinds. Positive contagion. There's the positive spiral and the negative spiral, and it's much more fun, for me at least, to participate in the positive sort of uplifting spiral.
If you told 20-something-year-old me this stuff, like, you're going to be kind of a hippie, Yeah. I was always kind of a hippie, but also I was like a dark.
A little bit, but
dark,
you were smart from the first time I met you. You
some
weren't
darkness,
a ding dong.
No, I wasn't an idiot, but I was also, not the sharpest tool always, because I was just
dulled by
messed up.
Yeah. But that, we each have our own flavor of messed up we get to work our way through. You had Granite Falls, whatever, going to the Marines.
All of it.
I had my own, which may look less challenging. Everybody has their flavor.
I used to have a chip on my shoulder about a lot of things. And, one of the beauties of getting older is you realize, sure, some people have had easier lives than others, but everyone encounters really difficult things. And if you grew up cushy and you experienced your first hardship as an adult, it's not any easier.
No.
Like, you are less prepared to deal with it because you don't have any of the tools in your toolbox.
I mean, actually, a couple of the most fucked up people I've ever known are some of the most hyper affluent. I mean,
right.
Growing up in, I have one old acquaintance who grew up, one of 5 or 6 brothers. They're, one grandfather was a founding board member of Chase Manhattan Bank. One was a founding board member of IBM, just like, and this one out of 6 had finished college. The rest were drug addicts, non-functioning drug addicts and alcoholics.
Look, in my house, like, if I was sitting in my house looking at, you couldn't see any other houses from my house, but if you sit in our trailer, if you had a phone line that wasn't a party line that you shared with 3 other households, like, I thought you were rich.
Yeah.
If you had fucking cable,
right?
Like, what do your parents do?
Rob banks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
Well, how'd you get so smart? Do you think it's just genetics? And because you're smart, you're sharp, you have emotional intelligence.
I don't think I always have. I've
always thought you were pretty.
The lessons of life what do you
attribute? How do you reckon with your kind of trajectory? Because I
had some important adults outside of the household.
Yeah, you had coaches or teachers, other
mostly,
mentors.
Yeah, music came into my life, and that was it.
Yeah.
Music, I was just like, this is it.
Yeah.
The Marines helped me a lot, even though I didn't make the best use of my time there. I sort of wasn't ready to embrace the idea that I was responsible for whatever happened. Right. I was just like, things are happening to me.
Right.
I'll drink then. So that's a terrible program. It's a terrible recipe for a shit life, and an unhappy life.
Well, the big thing is that kind of that moment where you're like, oh shit, I guess I am in charge. I guess it's up to me, because everybody, if you don't have that moment at some point in your life, you're in for a world of hurt for your whole life.
I know a lot of people who are grown-ups who haven't really wrapped their head around that concept. I know a few
too,
it's
but
really
that's
awful.
Hopefully you get. Yeah, mine came through a kind of situation at school pretty young, like 8th or 9th grade, like getting in trouble and being forced to make a decision, or being empowered by my parents to allow me to make the decision. Like, well, do I want to get my shit together or not? And okay, I guess I do. I guess sneaking out at night and smoking weed and stuff is not maybe the way to go as a general default MO.
I also I never had a curfew.
Mm-hmm.
I never had any restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
I could do anything I wanted, ever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember ever.
Right.
I could leave in the middle of the night
Right.
if that's what I chose to do. And because I could, there wasn't as great of an appeal.
Right.
And so also my way of rebelling was sort of like, well, I don't really want to go to prison. And that's where most
People were going.
of the people in my family were going. So it was just kind of like, I've done some visiting. It doesn't seem that great.
Monroe or wherever.
No, ironically, my brother-in-law is the warden in Monroe. Yeah, I might go do some music program stuff there.
That would be cool.
Actually. No, I grew up visiting my dad in San Quentin and San Luis Obispo,
I can't even imagine.
Tracy, all over
Was
in
it
California.
drug-related stuff or?
Everything you can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a great motivator. And my even in death, my father continues to motivate me.
By a negative example?
Yeah.
You take it where you can get it. I mean, that's so far outside of my experience that I can only imagine in the slimmest way what that would have been like. But on the other hand, as you know, when you're a kid, you just are doing what you're doing.
That's all you know.
Yeah, that's all you know. And what matters at some point is that I think, now having raised 2 kids and gotten older, it's like at some point, hopefully there's somebody, ideally maybe it's one or more parents, but there's somebody who's paying attention and kind of both looking out for you and also giving you the space to make some choices on your own. And I was lucky. My parents, my mom, my dad, and my stepdad were all super supportive and understanding and set boundaries, but also let me screw up and then be responsible for it.
Yeah.
So that's where I see kids getting screwed up in my kids' generation and in our peers, is the people who never were asked to be, every success they had, the parents took credit for. Every failure they had, the parents blamed them for the kids for, but also fixed for them, right? That's where people get really fucked up, is when they don't have to I fucked up. I got to make it right. I got to go, I shoplifted in 5th grade. I got to go to the pharmacy and ask for the manager and tell him what I did and apologize. Okay.
Accountability.
Yeah. That's kind of what it comes down to, right? And because then you do that for yourself too. That becomes ingrained that you, and then so much of it is luck. Who you encounter as a role model, or for me, I hardly drink at all anymore. When I was younger, I really liked to binge drink. I liked to be drunk, but my body could not. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't drink every day. My digestive system would just fall apart. But if it could have withstood it, and I have his great grandpa Riley, who was a city of Seattle employee, who famously was like, if it weren't for my bad stomach, I would have been dead in the gutter by the time I was 24. I can relate to that because my psychological propensity, I'm wound pretty tight and I'm pretty anxious and keyed up most of the time. So having a drink and a half feels really good.
Yeah.
And if 1.5 feels good, 3
Imagine
or 4
how 9 will be.
Yeah, exactly. So when I was younger, I indulged that more, but and I couldn't, going on tour, I basically stopped drinking because it was just like, I can't do this,
That's another thing. Imagine how differently your life could have evolved and turned out if you had gotten some sort of drinking related trouble when you were in high school or college. It's something as simple and relatively innocent that can get you just from a good path, just shifted 2 lanes over.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And all of a sudden,
yeah,
bad shit's happening.
No, and again, as I said, it's just luck that I didn't have the physical. I don't have the iron constitution that would have enabled what I wanted to do, which would have been what Duff did, for example. I probably could have blown my pancreas up in terms of my psychological appetite, but my body just couldn't I just stopped because it hurt. It's physically hurt too much after, you know.
It hurt me too, but I just
took
love
a few
pain.
more years.
Bring the pain.
Bring the pain. Well, and then there's the cure for pain. The next day, you just go for the hair of the dog and
Mas tequila.
Mas tequila. Yeah.
Dave, before we go, I want to talk about what you're doing now.
Well, I don't have a full-time job anymore, which is really
It's a great feeling.
pretty fun, pretty nice. And I'm playing music for fun, which it turned out is really fun. So I'm in 4 bands. I have rehearsal tonight with Mega Cat, which is me and Kim and Ryan from Smoky Brights, and great drummer Aaron Benson, who you may have.
I do know Aaron Benson. Aaron Benson played on the Union Gospel record.
Yeah, he's phenomenal.
He's really good. Tell him I said hello, please.
I will. He plays percussion with Smoky Brights, and then he's playing drums in this band. And this guy Jacob Winahan, who's playing percussion, who's drummer in La Fonda and a bunch of other bands.
Okay.
And then we throw in horn players here and there. Mega Cat's a thing. Kim and Ryan and Aaron, sort of end of COVID, were just, you know, hanging out in the basement, wasting time, and they just basically made this record. Turned out just these weird jams. They're instrumental, and I knew, it's a long story. I, in high school, went out with Kim's half sister, so I'd kind of met Kim and Ryan, just gone to a show and been like, "Hey, you're Caitlin's half sister," and had befriended them and was kind of helping them. I'd give them feedback on Smoky Brights demos and brainstorm about the business, and they sent me this thing. They're like, "What do you think about this weird instrumental music?" I'm like, I want to be in that band, and we need to book some shows. So I didn't play on the record, but the record is on Sub Pop. It's on Share It, which is Sub Pop's kind of philanthropic imprint, and it's getting played a ton on KEXP, and it got a bunch of great press, and we've been playing festivals. So that's the one original thing, and it's super fun because it's instrumental, and it's like, I'd been playing, like, I can play quote unquote jazz, but I'm not a real jazz musician. I had a little jazz trio with my daughters when they were in high school. I don't want to play jazz because it's a lifetime pursuit to really be good at it. I don't want to play. I've been wanting some instrumental music to play, you know, but I don't want to be like, you can start a surf band. That's always cool. I don't want to be trying to make Joe Satriani, Jeff Beck, you know, Steve Vai music, because that's just, you know, it's not where I'm at. And it's kind of fell into my lap. It's like this super cool, it's a cool record. Check it out, Mega Cat. It's this weird instrumental music that defies, I mean, I think I told you the other day, I describe it as like Krungbin meets the Monkees. It's like
awesome, kind
of dancey, kind of trancey, kind of jazzy, or it's or porno music if all pornos were made by people with masters in fine arts from, like, you know, RISD or some art school. It's like weird
Hanna-Barbera porn.
Hanna-Barbera MFA porn. It's like, yeah, it's like Sigmund and the Sea Monsters porn.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's this cool instrumental music. And then the other bands are cover bands. It's Bowie Rex, with, you had Tim DiGiulio on the other day. And him, Mike Musburger playing drums, who...
What a band.
Known forever. Jeremy Lightfoot, who's phenomenal. And he's in one of my other bands.
A ripper.
And Martin singing, who we've both worked with for years, Martin Fevier. And then we have the Suffragette sisters, Melissa, Martin's wife, and Jeremy's gal, Rhiannon, and sometimes another gal from Vashon, who's a phenomenal singer. Hopefully she's going to be with us all the time now. And that's super fun. That's all like mid-70s glam through early 80s post-punk. And that's fun. It's really fun to play with. It's weird. Tim and I... Like, we both grew up in the same neighborhood, and there are about 1 billion DiGiulios in Northeast Seattle, but I'd never really, and then we'd been in the same scene for 40 years.
Would you say there's 8 bajillion?
8 bazillion DiGiulios. Anyway, I had never really even talked to him until we started this band, and now we're, you know, hanging out and playing music together, and it's really fun to play with him. He's great, and we have very complementary. I mean, he's so good at that, like, I've never played with somebody who's so good at just like meat and potatoes rock guitar. The vibe, the way he approaches his leads, and the sounds he has is just like, it's a very specific thing. It's one thing, and which I super respect this in musicians. Like, I'd much rather play with somebody who's really good at one thing and owns it than somebody who can sort of good at lots of things.
You won't find someone much better than that in Seattle than Tim.
No, or anywhere. I mean, he just, the whole thing is, and it's great because I'm more interested in trying to find weirder things or more angular things that are less expected.
Right.
But he's got that bass just covered. Anyway, so that band's fun. And then the other bands one's this dad band of guys, mostly from Mercer Island, who I met through. And that's a band that, like, the only other person who has really played is Christian Fulgham, who was Martin's partner when they started Jupiter and was in Sister Psychic. And he's a few years older than me, and he's been around for years. He's playing bass, even though he's really a great guitar player. I play guitar, and then there's other guitar player guy is like a strategic business consulting guy. Singer was a marketing guy at Microsoft for years. Drummer's a radio ad sales guy for Pandora, Sirius XM. Keyboard player's a personal money manager, great musician. So that was bands like all amateurs, and we just we're getting better and better, and we're now playing like we're gonna do a Battle of the Bands night with Nightwave at the Crocodile on July 5th. So we're just on the cusp of like professionalism.
Elevated dadness.
I'm kind of the player coach in that band. Yeah, I have to be a little bossy from time to time.
Sure.
And then the last band is the Special Writers, which is like me. Jeremy's usually playing bass and singing. If not Jeremy, like Keith Lowe or Andy Stoller. Drummers usually.
You're not going to go wrong with any of those.
No, Eric Eagle's playing drums, who's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Played with everybody. And then Bill Malloy plays guitar, keys, sings. His daughter Kate, who just finished her first year at Eastman School of Music, plays keys when she's in here in summer. And she's a monster at 19. She's like she's been taking piano lessons from Wayne Horvitz since she was like in the womb.
Right.
She's terrifying. And then Bill's niece, Claire, who just graduated high school, sings. And she's like, it's like Janis Joplin and a 17-year-old. It's insane. So we've been playing quite a bit, and Darren Lucas plays some of the gigs. So we're doing, like, this summer we're playing at Vashon at the Sugar Shack. We're playing a wedding. Nice. We're doing some other parties. So I don't know.
When is Boogie Army playing?
Boogie Army is playing West Seattle Summerfest thing the Saturday. I think we're one of the headliners, maybe.
Yeah.
Then we're playing the next Friday at Flight Path. Have you been to Flight Path in Burien?
Baby, that's my neighborhood.
Fuck, that's a cool place.
Have you been there on a Thursday night?
No, but Billy Stover, who you've probably met, who plays in Bowie Rex, who I didn't mention, unfortunately, he's a phenomenal piano player and keyboardist. He's the one who connected us because he goes down and plays on Thursday nights.
It's awesome.
I got to go check that out.
I urge you to do so.
It sounds a little like the Scarlet Tree used to be up on Roosevelt, which is kind of dance music, mixed crowd.
Yeah. It's awesome, and I love it because it's an environment that I haven't spent a lot of time in, and it's a part of Seattle that I've never had access to.
No, I know. It's cool.
It's an entirely different community of musicians.
Yeah.
It's an entirely different audience.
I need to go on a Thursday night. We played a Friday or Saturday there. We're playing that Friday, and then the Saturday after in mid, we're playing, I think we're headlining the Strawberry Festival Saturday night on Vashon.
Awesome.
And then we got some other gigs coming up too. So lots of gigs. Mega Cat's playing. We're doing Sonic Guild this Saturday. Then we're at Nectar the Fremont Solstice Festival. Then we're at Timber Festival, isn't that out in Snoqualmie Valley somewhere? In late July, we're lots of gigs.
Yeah,
playing downtown music at lunchtime. Yeah, I've got
your summer carved
one
out.
or two gigs every week this summer. Yeah, so and it's fun. I don't know. I probably play more guitar now. In the last 6 or 7 years, I have probably played and practiced more than I ever have. And I'm also kind of more into it. And I think it's because I realize that I'm getting old and my fingers are not going to work forever. And I'm like, I better fucking do this now while I can, because I'm not going to be able to do this forever.
When you can see the finish line, when you can see on the horizon,
It's a motivator.
that last stretch of road, you kind of it feels more important.
It certainly feels like you want to savor it as much as possible, and it's a great gift because, as you were saying earlier, it's like as you've gotten older, you're like, there are a lot of blessings with getting older. I'm way less stressed out than I was. I'm way more accepting in all kinds of relationships, whether a love relationship or family or friends. Just
leave the campsite in a better state of affairs than when you arrived,
and just let people do what they're doing. Let them show you who they are. And then if what you see you like, then you hang out with them. If you don't fucking try to change them.
Yeah, move on.
Exactly. Like, what was I thinking?
It's okay.
Yeah.
Move on.
Yeah. I love that. There was a great quote of I think it was on Instagram. It was Keanu. He's like, yeah, pretty much I'm at the age where I just don't get involved in discussions anymore. I'm like, 2 + 2 = 5. You just go with that. Right. Have a good time with it.
It's fine.
Great. Yeah. So that's the music. That's just awesome. More guitar and trying to figure out how to make it sound good. You know how it is with guitar. It's like every day you're trying to find something that you feel like is chasing the thing, that thing that feels like you and is a unique expression of you, but that really serves whatever it is that you're playing with. And
before you leave, I'm going to plug that in and I'm going to put it on 10 and let you hear it, and let you play the Telecaster right there through it.
I know that.
And it is a really glorious sound. I was looking everywhere. I was like, I have to get like a deluxe style amp. And then I was like, wait a minute. I have one.
I just sold a deluxe clone. And I had a real tweed panel, narrow panel deluxe.
You cock.
I bought it. Do you remember Billy Stapleton, that guy who used to run American Music?
Yeah,
he found it for me and sold it to me for $1,000. It's probably worth $10,000 now. I sold it 10 years ago. It's actually on that President's cover of Cleveland Rocks. That's on was the Drew Carey theme song. I will gladly turn that up and play it loudly.
Yeah. It's time to wrap it up.
Okay, let's wrap. I got to go to rehearsal.
Thank you for making time to come over here. I've had an awesome time talking with you.
Likewise, we can do
it's a pretty relaxed, chill spot.
This is great. I come in here and just have a cup of coffee, and I mean, you're always good to talk to anyway.
Sometimes I do just come down here. Like, it's nice to just clear. This is where I build my pedal board. I mess around. I can be loud here.
Well, whether it makes the cut or not, are you playing guitar? I mean, I know you're playing bass in Ugly Kid Joe. Or what are you doing guitar playing wise right now?
I'm playing guitar in the long winters.
Oh, that is guitar. Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Jeff Fielder will be on the bass guitar.
Oh. A good Jeff Fielder story. The first time I met Jeff and played with him like 15 years ago, in my public affairs job, I helped organize the market, Pike Place Market Centennial. And as part of that, Andrew and I organized the Iconics, which was a band that played like 15 songs, starting with folk songs from the 50s, all the way up through, Barracuda, and having a guest artist on every song, singing. And it's all on YouTube. It was on the Seattle government TV channel. And it was pretty cool. Musburger played drums, Ty Bailey on keyboards. I played guitar, Andrew played guitar, and some guy named Jeff Fielder played bass. Thank God I had never heard him play guitar when I had to play guitar with him. Right. Because I'm like, Andrew's like, I got Jeff's awesome. He'll play bass. He's great. I'm like, great. Oh, Jeff, good to meet you. He's got his little fucking pork pie hat on. Yeah. He's just killing it on the bass. And then we rehearsed for 3 weeks, and then we played the show. And then like a year later, I went and heard him play guitar. I was like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed.
Well, that's the thing is like, he's so known for being a guitar player that he's like the most underrated bass player.
He was a really good bass player.
And he's a fucking phenomenal bass player.
He's I actually had an interesting thing with him. He and I, for different reasons, both played on these kind of hobby recordings for this guy, Michael Miller, I worked with at Amazon. Mm-hmm. And I did it just for fun, and I'd given him some names, and he recorded it out at this place out in the North End that the Parashers used to have, where Pearl Jam made the first record, the studio. London Bridge.
Yeah.
And I went out there and I played on these songs, and this guy actually he's Australian, he wrote really cool, like if there was a market for mid-90s, pop grunge songs, and 56-year-old guys singing them,
Nailed
he'd be huge. They're cool songs, and it was really interesting. I played on a bunch of them, and then he's like, well, yeah, here's some other people you gig, like Jeff Fielder's great. And he did different mixes, and it was really interesting because Jeff and I each played on different versions of like 6 or 8 songs. And the versions I played on, it sounded like a rock and roll or rock song with someone like Pete Townsend playing guitar. All of the versions Jeff played on all of a sudden became almost like roots Americana.
Dude.
It was super interesting. And then, he played one of the best shows I ever saw was at Vashon when Mike and Liz McConnell opened their bar there. They had Lanigan play those shows by himself with just Jeff playing electric.
I saw that a few times.
Oh my God, it was good.
Yeah.
And Fielder had like 3 or 4 different delays and reverbs where he was getting these kind of big sounds and playing fingerstyle most of the time. It was one of them, and I love Lanigan singing, despite what an asshole he was about my band in his book.
Specifically, Jason.
Specifically, Jason got 2 or 3 pages.
He really got torn apart.
But anyway, Jeff Fielder, his playing, he's really, really good. He's so musical. So you're playing guitar in Long Winters.
Yeah.
Bass, Ugly Kid Joe. Other guitar.
And bass with Duff.
Oh, bass with Duff, right. And you guys are actually going to go out and tour.
Fuck yeah. I'm so
Is
happy
Duff,
about it.
I mean, Tim's playing guitar, right? Yeah. Is Duff going to do strummy strum or really focus on
Fielder's
singing?
in that too. Multi-instrumental, guitar, keys.
Does he play any lap steel or
he plays slide. Yeah.
I bet he's a
Let's
good keys
finish
player.
this up while we're messing with the amp.
Okay, let's mess with the amp.
Buddy, give it to me.
God, it's a pleasure. I'm just so glad you're back in Seattle.